On behalf of the Society for the Preservation of Greek Heritage, I would like to welcome you here tonight on a special event, Greek Heritage Preservation and the Future of Greece, the Challenges Ahead. This is a special night for us because it combines two key elements of our mission. The first is the concept of Greek heritage as fundamentally linked to the future of Greece. The physical landscape, the monuments, the people, and their society. In a very important way, it is difficult to imagine Greek heritage without Greece. But also because we have a certain liking for data and science, and you're going to hear lots of data tonight. SPGH was founded in 1974 at the end of a major ordeal in modern Greek history that left the physical and cultural environment in a state of dilapidation. And at that time, we would really fundraise and send to Greece funds to help preserve and restore important, I would say, emblematic Byzantine and neoclassical monuments. Again now, Greece is in the late phase, to use the prominent or the dominant rather Greek narrative, in the end of a financial collapse with manifold crises in the public domain, but perhaps also the fabric of society. So here we are in the footsteps of another major crisis. The two have important, obviously, similarities and differences. And as SPGH, we have addressed a lot of issues, many issues that have to do with Greek history. Both the remarkable nation building in the late 19th century and the first half of the 20th century, but also crisis Hellenism. How in the history of Hellenism we have a tendency to create crises. So the crisis you're going to be talking today is not totally foreign to us. We also addressed a major problem at the cross-sectional time, which is the curse of brain drain 3 or 4 years ago. But these problems belong to the history, so these are crises in the historical space or crises facing today's Greeks and Philhellenes, but tonight we're going to be talking about the future. So we had crises of the past, crisis in the present. Now we're going to be talking about crisis for the future. Our featured speaker, Theodoris Georgakopoulos, who we welcome to Washington tonight, he is going to talk about demographics, climate change, and other major forces that are going to be shaping up the population and physical environment in Greece in the decades to come, based on the studies of the independent Greek think tank, the Analysis, where you serve as an editorial director. Theodoris is a greatly accomplished writer and journalist. He's a columnist in Kathimerini, and he has written for major Greek and European magazines, newspapers, and websites on diverse issues on politics, policy, technology, and science. And you also have authored 5 books based on my notes. And on a parting note of caution, where I'm going to use a little bit of my physician skill, if you wish, when it comes to crisis, we have crisis, again, in the past, crisis at the present time, and crisis for the future. At the psychological level, history is relatively innocuous, and I'm talking about the psychological level. The account of the present in most people is viewed with a hope that things may change, but it is the crisis in the future that really frightens people the most. And I'm afraid that Theodoris will not spare us a little bit of a dystopian taste of reality tonight. It almost reminds me of Al Gore's The Inconvenient Truth. Remember the movie about global warming in 2006? But he will also ring a wake-up call that should hopefully catalyze a much-needed discussion on what needs to be done how the diaspora and our organizations can come to help, and as in the case of global warming, how we can embrace the truth of crisis, raise awareness, and do whatever we can to mollify the consequences of what it is to come. The way we're going to be doing this tonight is Todorius will speak for about 30 to 35 minutes, and then I will attempt to dramatize it with some questions, and following that, we will open it to the audience. Todori, come to the podium.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. Let me try and change the presentation. There you go. So, thank you for having me here. Thank you for the work that the SPGH is doing on behalf of our common cultural heritage. Vasilis asked me to come here and talk to you about Greece, the actual country as it exists today. I work, as he mentioned, for a non-profit think tank based in Athens, and during the past 3.5 years, we have been doing research on a series of issues. We have published 37 studies. We've organized 44 public events in Greece and abroad. We've had over 100 speakers come to our events and speak. Over 10,000 citizens have come to our events, and in that time, we have come up with literally hundreds of policy recommendations and some valuable conclusions. And we have also ended up with a lot of numbers. So I thought I would use this device to talk to you about Greece today, pick some of the most important numbers that characterize our country today, and talk to you about them. Each one individually tells you something about an aspect, a specific sector of Greek society or the Greek economy. But if you take them all together, you can get a pretty good overall sense of where our country is now and where it is going. So first, let's talk about the economy. We know this, things are bad. I will spare you the numbers that many people use to describe the Greek economy, about the GDP, about debt, about unemployment, and move on to some other numbers that fewer people talk about, but show what our financial crisis means for our society. This is the first one. Almost 1.5 million people is the approximate number of people that live in absolute poverty in Greece. We wanted to study the issue of poverty and come up with policies that could alleviate the problem, but first we had to measure it. So our researchers came up with a methodology to do that. They designed a basket of products and services that are considered absolute necessities for survival, and they put a price on that basket using the actual market prices of these products and services. The price is different depending on the size of the household, whether people live in rural areas or in the cities, whether they pay rent or they need to pay a mortgage or they own the house. And then the researchers analyzed the data, the most current and accurate data that we have on income, on household income. And they were able to find how many Greek households have incomes that don't allow them to purchase this particular basket of products and services. And they found that in 2009, 2.2% of the population lived below that threshold. 2.2%. In 2016, it was 13.6%. Now, not all of these people suffer. We know that a very high percentage of Greeks delay paying their utility bills, delay paying their rents. We know that a very high number of Greeks is dependent on others outside of their household, mostly their parents or their grandparents, to complement their income and to get by. Many of these transfers aren't recorded by the data, but overall the picture is bleak. This is a very high number, and it's a very high percentage of very low income people in a society. And this does have repercussions. This is the percentage of young unemployed Greeks that think it is possible to find employment in the next 6 months. Only 15% believe that they will get a job in the next 6 months. The economy has been very slow to add new jobs, and the new jobs that are being added are seasonal, part-time, or very low-paying jobs. So then this happens. 48% of young Greeks say that financial support from parents or relatives is a source of income. It's the number one source of income for young Greeks. Only 45% say that their salary is a source of income. Essentially, you have so many young Greeks who are dependent on their parents' pensions, which leads to this. 29% of these young people believe that they will be worse off than their parents. Almost a third of our young population are convinced that their lives, their financial situation will be worse. But 55% of their parents think that their children's lives will be worse. So why is our economy in such a bad shape? It's not a simple question. There's a variety of factors at play. And again, I will refrain from talking about the usual things that are being discussed, how we came up to the crisis. But the most important factor, I think, is this. We're really bad at too many things. We do a lot of things wrong. Here is a small sample. 1,580 days, that's how long it takes for our justice system to enforce a contract, according to the World Bank. Now, our justice system is not terrible. Its independence has been under attack lately, but we are not a banana republic. Judges decide independently, laws are enforced. The system pretty much works, eventually. Our justice system is very slow. Cases take forever to go to court. When they go to court, there is stifling bureaucracy. The courts are badly organized, they're badly managed. The process is a mess. And I don't know how many entrepreneurs we have in our audience tonight, but everyone who has ever started a business or invested in something knows that this is perhaps the most important thing, more important than taxation, more important than access to capital. In order to invest in a country, you have to know that when something goes wrong or you go to court, you will be judged in a timely fashion and justly. You can't build a factory or a hotel in a country and then get stuck in court for 6 years. This is a very important thing, and we are really bad at it, but it's not the only thing we're bad at. This is the number of tax laws, 37, that passed between 2001 and 2016. Taxes are very high in Greece, but the most important problem is that the tax system changes all the time. Almost twice a year, we have a new tax law. And this is not a tax problem. It is a problem with the way we legislate. We have too many laws, and they are badly written. This is the total number of laws passed between 2001 and 2016. In 16 years, they take up over 65,000 pages. And this is a very important problem. There are currently 27 laws dictating how music schools and dance schools should operate. In this environment, bureaucracy thrives. Nothing gets done unless it's specifically specified in a specific law. Some people don't know what is legal and what isn't. And of course, this complicated regulatory chaos is where the clientelistic character of our government resides. 0.9% is the percentage of GDP that Greece invested in research and development in 2014. That's less than 1%, while other advanced countries spend over 2%, in some cases 3% of their GDP annually. And out of this amount, about 2/3 are public expenditures, and a paltry third is business investment in R&D. We are among the lowest ranking countries in Europe in investment in research and development. So we're not good at investing in new ways to produce more wealth. And there are also many existing opportunities we have allowed to slip. Here are some quick examples. This is the share of revenues that we have, that our country has in the Mediterranean cruise industry. This number is from 2011, 4%. As you may know, the Mediterranean market is the second largest market in the world after the Caribbean. And here's the interesting thing. Greece is a really popular destination. We actually get around 17% of arrivals, but we only get 4% of revenues. Why is that? Because our ports are not good enough. They're not good enough for cruise companies to use as home ports, and thus spend more money when they begin and end their cruise there. We were too late to open this market, but we eventually did that. It was mandated by our lenders. But when we did that, even after we did that, we still lack the infrastructure and the initiative to invest in that market. And we let that opportunity slip away. There are others as well. 70% of high-quality Greek olive oil is exported to Italy in bulk. And they take this, they repackage it, they brand it, and they sell it in a very high price in the international markets. Now, the Greek economy has a big problem with exports, especially the export of goods and products. In 2016, we exported goods worth 23 billion euros. At the same time, Portugal exported double that amount, 46 billion. Slovakia, notice that I selected to talk about small countries. Slovakia's exports were 64 billion. The Czech Republic's were 133 billion. Sure, they build cars, but they're a small, previously poor country. Now, our economy is problematic. It's not extroverted enough. And that isn't entirely the government's fault, by the way. Businesses, the business community is at fault here as well. This 28% is the percentage of Greek land that is protected under the Natura 2000 program. Several European countries take advantage of these sites, these protected sites, to invest in tourism and to empower local communities. We have so many of them, so many of these sites, and some of them are truly spectacular. Only about 30% of them are under some jurisdiction. The rest, out of 419 protected sites, only about 95 sites are managed by some entity. The rest are managed by nothing. They just exist there. We projected that if we build sustainable tourism services in only 40% of all these sites, using methods that other countries are already using, we would be able to generate over 2 billion euros of revenues annually. One final example. There's a dam in the mountains of Pindos that was built in 2001. It was completed in 2001. It's complete with a hydroelectric plant, with the engines installed and everything. It cost about €500 million to build. It's one of the largest in the country. We have two pictures of it. It looks like this. Hasn't operated one single day because of legal issues. It could be producing energy today. It could be making 20 to 30 million euros per year for our virtually bankrupt public energy company, but it doesn't. It just sits there, a man-made natural hazard. Now, one thing I need to stress is that all these issues are complicated. There are serious reasons that this dam remains closed. There's a reason that we haven't been able to capitalize on our advantages as much as other countries have, at least. Each case is different. If you want, we can talk about each one later, but the problem is that there's too many of them. During our research, we constantly come upon missed opportunities, and many people don't realize this. So there's no particular public pressure to take advantage of these missed opportunities. And this is particularly frustrating for us because we've been finding that a lot of people are wrong about too much all the time. Here is an example of how little we know. 160 billion euros is the amount of direct funds that our country has received from the European Union. Not loans, not bonds, direct cash for specific projects and for farm subsidies. Our airports, our highways, our playgrounds, our buses, our trolley cars, the restoration of ruins, the digital system we input taxes, we do our taxes in. They have all been paid by money which is essentially money by German and Swedish taxpayers. Now, this money has been the lifeline of our country for the past 40 years. And yet, 47% of Greeks believe that Greece was harmed from its participation in the EU in financial matters. Now, our country has traditionally been one of the most pro-European nations, but the crisis has damaged the way that we approach the EU. A majority of farmers believe that our participation in the EU was a bad thing, and they are the ones who benefited the most. Still, this is the reality we're facing now. But Vasilis talked about the future. What about the future? What do the numbers tell us about what is to come? Yeah, we have some numbers about that as well. This is the median age in Greece today, one of the highest in the world. Imagine a Greek person, Sophia. She's right in the middle of the age distribution scale. Half of Greeks are younger than her, half of Greeks are older than her. She is 44 years old. Back in 1955, that person in the middle of the distribution would have been 25. By 2050, that median age will be over 50 years old. Greece is getting older. We did a series of projections on our population for the future, and it seems that by 2050, 1 in 3 Greeks will be over the age of 65. Today it's 1 in 5. This is the fertility rate in 2016, one of the lowest in the world. Greece is shrinking right now. Since 2011, and for the first time since data became available, the Greek population is declining. It's going to continue to decline. We did these projections, and all of our scenarios show a decline in population. The most probable scenario says that by 2050 there will be 8.8 million Greeks in the country. By the way, by that time, Greece is going to be a much less pleasant place to be in. There will be 20 more heatwave days annually, every summer by 2050. We did a study on the impact of climate change on the Greek economy over the next few decades, and the results were bleak. There was, I don't know if you remember this, there was a summer heat wave in 2003 in Central Europe. It was regarded as a 1 in 1,000 years event. 70,000 people died. According to some moderate projections, by 2040, every summer in Europe is going to be like that. Our projections took a moderate scenario. There are several scenarios about what will happen with emissions over the next few decades. Our scenario was based in the assumption that we will miss the Paris Accord goals by a little. That means that by the middle of the century, we will have a lot less rainfall, a drop by 12%. Sea levels are going to rise by about half a meter. There will be extensive drought, which will influence agriculture. Energy costs will skyrocket. Tourism will be affected. In some small ways positively, because the tourist period will be extended, but in most ways negatively. We will have more and more intense forest fires. This is what happens to the Athens coastline if the sea rises for about 50 centimeters, half a meter. This is Lemos in Vouliagmeni, where a brand new Four Seasons hotel just opened. Within 30 years, the peninsula is very likely to become an island. Now, some of us will probably be there to witness all this, but the next generations have even more at stake. Are they equipped to handle these challenges? Do we help them prepare? Nope. This is the percentage of Greek students aged 15 and 16 who are low achievers in reading comprehension. This is from the PISA scores of 2015. PISA stands for Program for International Student Assessment. It's an OECD program, essentially a test that takes place, that is taken by high school students in 79 countries every 3 years. They test 3 different things: reading comprehension, mathematics, and science. Depending on the result, they put the students in different categories. Levels 5 and 6 are the high achievers, the ones that do well. Only 8.3% of the students are in this elite group in the OECD countries when it comes to reading comprehension. 8.3% are the students who can understand content and context of a complicated text and can answer questions on that. In Greece, it's 4%. And 27% of students are at level 1. And it gets worse. In science, it's 30% who are at level 1. In mathematics, it's 36%. 1 in 3 Greek students either fails to understand even the basics from written language, or is unable to solve simple mathematical problems, or is unable to understand basic scientific concepts. Now, these percentages are much higher than the OECD average, and these results are pretty stable over time. Since 2000, when the OECD began these tests, Greek students' results were pretty much the same over time. And by the way, this test was taken in 2015. These kids will vote next week. But, maybe we have failed our high school students, maybe the next generation is already doomed, but what about the generation that comes after that? This is the percentage of Greek children aged 3 or younger who have access to preschool education. Only about 9 in 100 Greek toddlers get access to daycare. The rest stay home with a parent or a grandparent. This is important for 2 reasons. Almost all advanced countries that have managed to maintain a healthy birth rate, countries like Sweden or France, provide extensive access to preschool education. This is important because providing such choices to modern families allow parents the ability to make choices for the size of their family, have their first kid, have their second kid. So this is important as a tool for rich countries to enhance their demographic picture. It's also important because, as research has shown, access to preschool education has an outsized positive effect to a child's academic development, especially for kids coming from poorer families. So Greece is far behind from its European counterparts on this. Back in 2002, European leaders set the so-called Barcelona goals. According to them, by 2020, 90% of kids aged 3 to 5 should have access to preschool education. 33% of kids that are younger than 3 should have access to preschool education. We are way off. Instead of 90%, we are at 55.6% for the kids that are 3 to 5. Instead of 33%, we are at 8.9%. Now, I have shown you some numbers about our economy, our society, our future. They do not paint a pretty picture. I have one more to show you. This emphasizes an underlying problem that affects everything else. And in my opinion, it's the most heartbreaking of all. This is the percentage of Greeks who say that strangers, other people, are trustworthy. It is among the lowest percentages in the world. This particular number comes from the World Values Survey, a global survey that takes place every 5 years in about 80 countries. The survey aims to study long-term values, not seasonal opinions. Last year, we funded Greece's participation in the study for the first time, and the results were actually very interesting because we have other studies, similar studies, social studies, and the results from other countries to compare to. Some researchers have gone even further, grouping the results into a cohesive chart that ranks countries based on some basic attributes. They place each country in an XY axis depending on whether people's responses show that there's a prevalence of progressive or traditionalist values in each society. That's the Y-axis. And whether they are more focused on their individual survival or their individual freedom, that's the X-axis. So based on data from other social studies, researchers placed Greece smack in the middle of the global values map. I don't know if that's visible, it's right in the middle of the screens that you see there. We're like the global average, values-wise, not too conservative, not too progressive, average. This is from data taken from around the time when the Greek crisis began, period between 2010 and 2014. What is interesting is that there has been a change from around 2000 to around 2010. At the start of the century, we were in a different place. We were more on the progressive side of the spectrum, closer to our northern European countries than to our Eastern European neighbors. And then we seem to have backtracked somewhat right at the start of the crisis. This is from around 2000, and this is from around 2010, where we are right in the middle, but still, average, dead center. Except in one regard, there is one issue in which Greek society is an outlier, the issue of trust. Now, you may have heard that Greeks show very low levels of trust in all kinds of institutions. We don't trust the government, we don't trust political parties, we don't trust the media. As it turns out from various different studies, we only trust 5 things. The army, the justice system, surprisingly, we trust the church and the police, and, not surprisingly, we trust the family. It seems like we don't trust anything that doesn't provide us with security and our families. Now, back in 1999, there was a question in the European Values Survey that went like this. Do you agree that other people are trustworthy? They asked that. And 21% of Greeks said yes. 21. In 2008, same question, 55% of New Zealanders said yes, other people are trustworthy. 44.6% of Germans said the same. In Yemen, during the war, 38.5% said that other people, yes, they are trustworthy. Greeks' answers were in line with Pakistanis and the Turks. Those are the societies where people have so low trust among each other. In 2017, in our study, only 8.3 Greeks said the same thing. So it has gotten a lot worse. Now we are at the level of countries like Colombia, Ghana, Zimbabwe, and Nigeria. Only countries like this have such low levels of trust. So we never trusted each other, not really, but now we really don't trust each other. And this is visible in our cities, in the way we treat public spaces, in the way we drive, in the fact that we need to import blood from Switzerland because we don't have enough donors. However, after all of this, before we conclude, I need to remind you of 3 important things. Almost all of these problems are solvable. This is important to remember. We didn't start out studying these issues in order to produce bleak presentations to make intelligent people sad. We study these issues to come up with solutions. We have complete sets of policy recommendations on almost all of them. We know what the government needs to do to help families raise as many kids as they want. We know what companies need to do to export more stuff. We know what the ports need to do to attract more cruise companies. What is missing is the political will and the public pressure towards these solutions. That's what we're trying to help with. Other countries have done it. It's not easy, but it is not impossible. There are solutions. And there's this other thing. During the crisis, the tax collection capability of the state became significantly better. Public administration is improving. After our report on the dam I talked about, the minister in charge signed the thing he was supposed to sign, and the process started moving along. Slowly, but it did start moving. Other things like education are getting worse, but during the past few years, some things are getting better. The problem is the pace. We're not alone in the world, and other countries are advancing much, much faster. We are facing the same problems they are facing, the rise of nativism, the rise of populism, but we are slower to move forward with solutions and adapt. We're falling behind. And that doesn't mean that we're not moving at all, that we're not moving forward. We are, but just not fast enough. And there's also this thing that we need to remember. Our starting point. Greece is not Ghana or Zimbabwe. Far from it, not even close. We are something like the 40th wealthiest country in the world still. A lot of kids, a lot of Greek kids go to university. We have one of the lowest child mortality rates in the world, one of the highest life expectancies in the world. We are a safe, peaceful, democratic country. As we've seen, both our values and our economic reality place us firmly in the group of developed nations. More importantly, and this brings me closer to the work that the SPGH is dedicated in, we are special. We're not a run-of-the-mill country. We're no disrespect to other countries, but some of them could cease to exist and humanity wouldn't notice. We're not like that. We're indispensable. A world without Greece would be inconceivable. We know this. We have used this in the past many times. In fact, Greece entered the European Union before it was ready, long before it made sense, long before normal countries like Portugal or Spain, because of that uniqueness. This is why I remain an optimist on the existential question that some of you may be pondering after this presentation. But I also remain heartbroken. And with this I will finish. I'm heartbroken because we are messing up. Again and again, our work at our organization proves that what we have been doing as a nation is not good enough. This is not good enough. We haven't done well enough. This country deserves more. Thank you for listening to me.
Let me ask a couple of questions. So, I will start with the solutions. You mentioned that these problems, or at least you said most of them, are solvable. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the analysis has actually articulated some policy positions and recommendations. Mm-hmm. Okay, let me challenge you. How are you going to solve the demographic problem?
Well, it's not easy and it's going to cost a lot of money, but it should be a priority. The demographic problem needs a series of things that need to be done. First, we have to provide tools to new parents, to actually new couples, to have as many kids as they want. Many people promote strategies that are sort of paying money for parents to have more kids. That's not the right incentive. The right incentive is for parents to know that they have a preschool that can take care of their kid while they're at work. Mothers to know that they have a job to return to after an extended maternity leave. Also, we have to extend parental leave to fathers as well, so they can play a bigger role in their children's lives. This has to be proactive. This has to work. We have to do things with the business community, because there is a serious problem in Greece in the private sector, not so much in the public sector, with parental leave. We need to help young couples have the security, financial security and job security in order to make these choices. This costs money. And when the question of where is the money going to come from comes up, I always have an additional number to say. 1.5 billion. That's the annual amount the Greek state pays for pensions for people under the age of 55. So it's an issue of priorities. Where do you want to invest? Do you invest in the relatively young pensioners or in the new generation that needs to be born? Now, there's a specific list of policies that can tackle this problem. It does cost money, but we haven't come up with them from our heads. These are things that are being implemented in countries that are doing good work in that regard. The demographic problem is being addressed in Sweden and France, where people are not trying to convince parents to have more kids. They're trying to make sure that mothers don't lose their job when they decide to have a kid. Other countries that spend a lot of money in measures that are like incentives, cash incentives for each kid that a family has, have failed to change things that too much, like Austria, for example, or Germany until recently. The discussion in Greece when it comes to demographic always turns to cultural issues. Many people have set opinions about what the lives of women or young parents should be like, whether people should work, how long they should work. We should skip past that and see what the Swedes are doing, how French mothers can take 3 years out of work with minimum pay and take care of their kids. And knowing that allows them to have a second kid and a third kid. So that's a very quick overview of the answer that we have on that specific question. By the way, it's going to be very difficult. This is not a specifically Greek problem. Ever since the 80s, many countries have seen the fertility rates drop, and in all cases where the fertility rate dropped below 1.5 kids per woman, it hasn't gone back up above that threshold. There is no record of a country that has dropped as far as Greece has, that has gone up again. So it's a very serious challenge, but we know where to start, and it's going to cost money.
Okay, thank you. So let's go to the issue of the specialness of Greece. I remember a very good American friend of mine at in the beginning of the Greek crisis, when the bond rates were climbing uncontrollably, perhaps because he wanted to console me, he taught me exactly that. Don't worry, in the end, Greece is Greece, and Greece will never go away. It reminds me of the adage of the anthem, Yala, Potere, Peteni, something like this. But there's two elements in this story, in this vignette. One is it possible that sometimes numbers, I don't want to say lie, but remember the Malthusian prediction in the end of the 18th century that because of exponential growth of global population, we would really be dying of a mass famine. Yet people have ingenious ways. They become very resourceful, and they always find ways to survive. Is there such a thing that applies to this thinking that you presented to us tonight?
Well, yes and no. There was something unforeseen that turned these prophecies into, fictions. And the unforeseen thing was that a doctor went to Mexico, found a new strain of wheat that was a lot more productive, and he was able to solve a very serious problem like this. If he hadn't done that, if no one had done that, maybe predictions would turn out to be true. The thing is that we don't know what this is in the case of Greece. Maybe there is something that comes, a magical AI that comes and solves Greece's problems. I sincerely hope that they will come. I will vote for it if it does. But we can't visualize it yet. So we have to work with the tools that we have. And fortunately, we have a lot of tools. We have other countries that have implemented solutions similar to the ones that we think are necessary in Greece today, successfully. We've seen the results. We know what to do in most cases. But the problem is not that a lack of policy recommendations, but a lack of political will and of public pressure to enforce those recommendations, to make those recommendations, turn them into policy, into actual policy. So we have to work with the tools that we have, and that's what we've been doing so far. And I have to say that Greece's problems are so complex, and some are cultural, some have to do with the issue of trust. We can't work together. We seem not to be able to work together. When we do, it's like an exception, and everyone is extremely happy. But in the truth of everyday life, we haven't formed very many big businesses. There aren't enough good jobs in the Greek economy. These problems need to be solved with dramatic measures and very soon. I can't say that if they aren't solved very soon, Greece will cease to exist. Obviously, this can't happen. But what can happen is that we can easily enter another cycle and another crisis very soon.
So I think I have a third question that's related to this, and that is, again, what my American friend was saying, a very important dimension of that saying was that Greece is, and Greeks are endeared, regardless of what Greeks are believe, but they're actually, every time you mention Greece or Greeks, there's a positive, I think, reflection. It's almost automatic. And let's not forget that for the diaspora, Greece is plan B. Many Greeks think that if something happens, in some way like Jewish people in the world, that Israel is for different reasons, obviously. And there are many people who want to visit Greece, not as tourists, but because they have some sort of deep sympathy and deep identification with monuments and other things. So Greece is in the hearts of many people, not only diaspora, but Philippines and others. And there are organizations like ours and so on who are committed to see that this part of the world survives. So there's enormous goodwill, if you want. The question is this an asset? And the second question is, how can one leverage this asset and monetize it, if you wish, to concrete, results to help with this problem?
Well, there are several technical aspects to what needs to be done in order, for example, philanthropic money to come into Greece more easily. But the main issue here is that this goodwill is natural. It hasn't been generated by policies or by anything any Greek government has ever done. So it's something that is so pure that it would be very dangerous to meddle with. It would not be the best thing in the world for a Greek government to go and reach out to people who want to help and say, give us your money. This could hurt the relationship. There are many aspects that could hurt that relationship that's, however, very deep-seated. I've witnessed it myself. I had the opportunity this past October to travel to 5 cities in the United States. I was able to meet a lot of people. I found exactly 0 people who didn't know what Greece was. From Uber drivers to mayors, everybody knew what Greece was. An astonishing percentage, about 30% of people I talked to have been to Greece. And I was traveling with other Europeans, and I had some Bulgarians with me, some Romanians. Nobody knew anything about their countries. Everybody knew everything about Greece, and especially when I went to cities that are a little smaller, like Pittsburgh, people always assumed a stance of, I'm from our village in Pittsburgh, I'm sure you don't know it, you come from the great city of Athens. Let me tell you about our little city. So this was a great revelation for me. It explained the goodwill that you mentioned in a very good way. So I don't think we should try to monetize or weaponize this goodwill. We should let it grow naturally. We should feed it by providing more good news coming out of Greece. We should feed it by catering to people who come to Greece in the best way possible, hosting them in a good manner, providing them good products and good services, helping more people have a positive, modern experience of Greece. And the other thing, the indirect thing also that we need to do is to help shape that idea, help infuse that idea of Greece with more modern elements. Do more to bring the idea of Greece to people with something reflecting on modern Greece, not just past glories and what the great tragic poets wrote, and the Acropolis and the things that people love Greece for now. To do that, we also need to change. We need to emulate other facets of Greek civilization. We need to be different, we need to be more proactive, we need to be more extroverted. We actually need to fix all these numbers and project a better image, a better modern image of Greece in the world. So in short, I think we should have an indirect way of dealing with that specific issue. We should let people love Greece for the reasons they love it already, and we should try to add a more modern bent in that, a more modern flavor. Do some positive things.
And we do have Seferis and Elitis and Carolus Koun and Hatzidakis and Theodorakis and Luxiadis. This is not the marbles and Socrates.
Yes, I would say, I don't think that's a controversial position, that they're not enough, and they're not recent enough, and almost none of them are alive.
I do want to take the risk of talking about live people because I would be controversial. Well, why don't we open it to our audience?
Yes, thank you so much for a really eye-opening lecture. It was fascinating. I love the statistics. My name is Maria Haciolas, retired Federal Bank staff. I was interested in some of the statistics you mentioned about the cost of doing business. I was surprised you didn't talk about corruption and governance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think perhaps that might be the key to some of these notions of mistrust in society, the fact that people seem to trust the police, the army, the kind of authoritarian aspect, but they don't trust governments,
mm-hmm.
per se, their leadership. And so I'm wondering what is the status of governance in Greece and leadership, and how does the sort of idea of democracy filter down to the local level? And is that something that needs to be?
Yes, it's a good question. I had a couple of numbers about tax evasion, but I only had about 30 minutes. I had so many other numbers I could mention. To answer, I would say that the situation in Greece is the same that has always been. Greece is a clientelistic democracy. It means that there is an unwritten contract between the people and the government. The people provide the votes, the government provides some sort of support, direct or indirect. It's not the best way to run a democracy, but it's a contract that has held for a very long time. And no, actually, when you talk about the way this contract works, I don't like to put "but" and something positive after it, because it's horrible. It's a horrible way to run a country. And it's one of the issues that needs to be solved. But whether this is a cause of the mistrust or whether it's the result of mistrust, I'm not quite sure. I think it's the second. People don't trust their government because they are dealing with it and they know how it works. They elect them and they know why they elected them, because our kid was hired in some hospital or some public service. And of course, you can't trust someone who does something openly corrupt with you. So I think the fundamental problem is the problem of trust. And I will mention something else as well to dispel the myth. Back on the issue of tax evasion. We Greeks evade paying taxes, right? We are outlaws. We disregard any authority. We don't like paying taxes. But who likes paying taxes? By the way, the numbers I had to show you were about the percentage of Greeks who work, who are self-employed or who work in very small companies. It's almost double, in some cases triple, than in other European countries. And that is the problem of tax evasion. A plumber or a taxi driver evades paying taxes everywhere. I once went to Berlin and asked for the receipt. The taxi driver didn't know what I was talking about. He tried to find some paper, he wrote something up. You don't find that in Athens now, by the way, that has changed. So these people, the self-employed and the employees in very small businesses, always have a very high incentive to evade paying taxes in all countries in the world. But there are too many of them in Greece. So tax evasion is a very large problem. If we had more multinationals, if we had more large companies who have to pay tax, they can't evade paying taxes unless they're very big and they can pay taxes in other countries and do things that we can't control as an individual nation. And that's the one important thing. So our tax evasion problem is not a problem of corruption per se. It's not in our DNA. We're not crooks. It's an issue of how our economy is structured. And the solution is self-evident. We should have more big businesses paying more to the people who actually pay taxes. We should have more people of the kind that actually pay taxes. High-paid, high-salaried workers in big companies and more big companies. The other number I was thinking about showing you was 8%. That's the percentage of individual taxpayers that pay 61% of income tax in Greece. Just 8% of the people. Over half of Greeks don't pay any taxes at all because they declare too little. So we should take that pool and enlarge it, have more workers, well-paid workers who pay taxes. Yes.
Thank you so much for the interesting and thoughtful presentation. Could you please comment on the impact of the refugees, most of them from the Middle East, and the Greek economy? Some of these so-called refugees are actually coming from old Greek communities that were there for thousands of years. There was time of Alexander the Great, educated people, medical doctors, and so on, and they speak Greek and so on. Could you please comment on their contribution to the Greek economy? Thank you.
Well, if you're referring to the recent wave of immigration from Syria, yeah, the impact on the Greek economy has been overwhelmingly positive, but not for the reasons that you imply. Over 1.5 billion euros have been entered the European economy, the Greek economy, from European funding to tackle the problem, to build infrastructure, to house these people, and to set up a way to deal with the issue. And that's the positive factor. All the well-trained refugees who came from Syria, who spoke a lot of languages, who had degrees, who could work and produce, left. They're not in Greece anymore. They went to Sweden, went to Germany, they went to countries who actively sought to recruit them, or to other countries where they thought they would have a better future. None of them wanted to leave, to stay in Greece. Only about 65,000 have remained. The majority of them are still on the islands. The vast majority of them are not participating in the economy. And the question of their integration and whether they will stay or not is still open. But still, the number is very small. It's almost insignificant, especially when you compare it to a very successful previous wave of immigration that we witnessed during the 90s, when people from the former Eastern European countries, after the fall of communism, flocked into Greece, and they actually helped build this country, because I mentioned the European funds that built our highways, our airports, our ports. All those things, including our houses, which we built with the very low interest rates that we had, were built by Albanian and Bulgarian hands. So we had that positive influx and positive influence in our society and in our economy. This wasn't duplicated this time. This time we were in a crisis. The people who came in didn't want to stay. The skilled workers left. And we are left with 60,000 people who aren't yet part of our economy. We have so many other, we have about 800,000 immigrants living in Greece and contributing into the economy. These new immigrants are a very small percentage of that. I think we could have done a better job on that. But still, you have to remember that in most countries in the European Union, attitudes when it comes to the issues of immigration are not positive. They are very negative. There are extreme cases like Hungary, where there is no immigration, and yet it's the number one issue of concern. That's not the case in Greece, but also in Greece there is a lot of skepticism, and public opinion is not positive when it comes to immigration and the influx of immigrants into the Greek economy. Yes.
Hi, my name is Sean Carberry.
Hi.
I'm not Greek, but
That's okay.
I've spent a lot of time dealing with struggling countries, fragile states. I've read a lot of reports and analyses on the problems, a lot of reports making recommendations about what needs to be done. The thing I've often found is a lot of this is really good at focusing on what, but doesn't do well at how.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious in terms of some of the things you've mentioned about what needs to happen. How do you make some of these happen given the challenges? Obviously, there are barriers to these things, or some of them would have been happening or implemented. So give a little more sense of how you make some of these reforms and changes you're talking about, and also the sequencing of which ones do you start with and what builds off of others.
Yeah, that's a very good question. It would need a very lengthy answer, but I'm going to try to keep it short. You're absolutely right that the main question is the how. The how is different in every single case. In every issue that we talked about today, there's a different way to do things. Usually the main problem and the reason why Greece hasn't solved these problems, who are pretty much problems that other countries have solved a long time ago, is that they make some people uncomfortable. There are entrenched interests that are being put in question by implementing reforms that these problems require. So to do that, you have to have one of two things: either a great political will that's strong enough to go against this clientelistic nature of our way of government, or to have public support, the support of the public. I talked about the multitude of laws that we have in the country. In the past 75 years, we have passed 885 pension system reforms, each one catered to one or more special interests, giving them some sort of bonus or something like that, from small things to very impactful and serious things that we still suffer from today. Now, you need to reform the pension system. You know what to do to reform the pension system. The person who is responsible to do that needs to go against all those special interests that have been served by the government in the past 75 years. You can't do that if you don't have a very strong mandate from the people, if you don't run a campaign based on that specific issue and the public supports you. That hasn't happened in our very well-functioning democracy in the past 45 years. By the way, we have one of the most well-functioning voting systems actually in Europe or in the world. People who govern are actually the people who get the most votes. People are free to vote. People are free to express their opinion. Even in very objective, the Economist Index rates us very high in that regard. So the thing is that the public doesn't support those solutions. But there are other things that could be solved without stepping on toes. For example, we solved the issue about opening up the cruise industry, the so-called cabotage. If you were a cruise ship owner from outside the European Union, you weren't allowed to use one of the Greek ports as your home port. This stopped in 2012. It should have stopped in the 70s, by the way. But once you went past that, and you had to do that because it was part of the deal of the Greek government with its lenders, the next steps are easier. You just have to have the initiative, and we have to go to the policymakers to tell them to stress the need to do that, you'll get 1 billion revenue a year. Is that clear? That's clear. Go ahead and do that. This is the way to implement policy. It's pretty much set. And if you want to get public support to do that, you can do that as well. So in each case, it's quite different. In most cases, it's difficult. In some cases, there are the so-called low-hanging fruits. And we want to focus on those first. So we went to the minister who was responsible to just put a signature. That's it. That's the how. You put a signature into a paper that says what the environmental impact of this dam is on the environment. Just sign it. It's good. Yeah, the two previous ministers said that they would sign it, that it's okay. Sign it and move forward. It's going to move forward. It's going to take years to go ahead and open it, but it's going to move forward. And those are the low-hanging fruits. And to go there to the pension system, there's a broad variety of problems in the middle. And each problem has its different way to approach this. But you're very correct in pointing out how important the how is.
Thank you very much for sharing these results.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could tell us what you've seen to have been the reception of your studies and solutions by the private sector in Greece. For example, do you see them willing to play an active role towards fighting for such initiatives, or even perhaps sponsoring campaigns to influence public opinion towards results they might want to see that they will help their businesses? But you must have a real sense by now of how the private sector in Greece is responding to your solutions.
Oh yeah, the private sector has always been friendly to policy recommendations and work like the work that we are doing. The Chamber of Industries has its own think tank. Actually, it's affiliated with two think tanks that we've collaborated with. So this type of recommendations and actions to promote the interests of the healthy business community have been around for a long time, and they were understandably very positive on what we're doing. So we're not working with them directly, we're not working with businesses, specific businesses. We're focusing on sectors, and we let the businesses do what they want with our results, because we're trying to be independent of all types of these associations. But there has always been an eagerness in the Greek business community for more openness, more freedom, for better alleviation of the obstacles that they're facing. They're facing obstacles in investing. They have all these problems with bureaucracy and the justice system. These are things that they have been requiring for a very long time. On the other hand, though, there is another part of the Greek business community that for a very long time has been dependent on its relations with the state. This is a huge part of the Greek economy, and it has had a detrimental effect both in the way our government is structured, and it has led to all these problems that I've mentioned with bureaucracy, mostly with bureaucracy. And they, in due time, they have formed very strong set interests that are fighting of keeping a status quo as it is. As time goes by, because these are businessmen as well, they would like to participate in an open market and be competitive. They have it in their DNA, they're businessmen. So we think that their resistance will erode. It's easier to have their resistance erode than a pensioner who gets 2,500 euros a month from his pension for the past 30 years. He became a pensioner at 52 for some reason. He's more probable to resist change and reform. Business interests, I think they're easier, they're more welcoming to our message. I haven't been keeping tabs on who's first, but yeah. Yeah.
That's a really asked question. So, I was looking at your statistics, and they're all very abstract. And I'm sure a lot of people are thinking to themselves, well, you know, okay, so what? So what does that mean to me? What can I do about it? Well, I don't have a question for you, but I've got an answer for you. The answer to that question is go to Greece on vacation. I've been to Greece on vacation so many times, more times than I can remember, mainly to connect with my heritage, but I can tell you that the food is great. The weather, you know, April through September was perfect. No sunshine, no rain, no humidity. The beaches are great. And contrary to what you may have, you know, the impression you got from your statistics is, you know, the Greek people are universally friendly. Another statistic that I have for you is 100% of the people I met over there last year when I went, 100% of the Greeks were very friendly, polite. Most of them, especially in the tourist environment, speak English. Go to Greece on vacation.
That's good advice for this year. Last year, I would have to ask where you intend to go. If you intended to go to Santorini in August, I would recommend that you don't, because last year was a record year for Greek tourism. We had over 35 million arrivals, and some destinations don't have the infrastructure and the capability to host that many arrivals. But it's getting better, and this year I think there will be a slight drop, so you can come go anywhere you want. Yep. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Miguel Rodriguez, I'm an Elenofilos, by way of an introduction. In the realm of foreign policy, Greece, under the current Prime Minister, has moved almost to be an elder statesman within Europe, and I don't just mean the Press Accord, but in several other ways as well. As a thinker, how do you see this journey that Greece has made within the councils of Europe?
This is the most difficult question that has been asked so far. And I have to try to censor myself extensively. So, here's the thing. Greece is not out of the crisis yet. The thing is that a government that was elected with a populist mandate, promising to magically solve the problems with the lenders and form some impossible new deal, did not in fact come up with a new deal, but it implemented for the first time everything that we have signed and promised to deliver with our lenders completely, flawlessly. Not flawlessly, actually, there have been many delays, but they did that. The reason that they did that, it was that they weren't in opposition. Greece could have been out of the crisis in the same sense that it is now from 2014 already. Because of this current government, we lost almost 5 years, and because of the way they handled that crisis. Also, I have to mention, despite the fact that I'm here with the capacity as the editorial director of this organization, as a journalist who has been following events in this country for the past several years, I have to say that there is a lot that people outside the country don't learn, like what this government has done when it comes to the justice system and how they appoint justices, or how this government approaches a series of other issues like taxation. I'll give you a number that I didn't add for the same reasons I mentioned earlier. Before the change of government around 2015, early 2015 actually, before the crisis began, the current administration began its real work, we do an annual survey asking a series of questions about what Greeks believe, and one of the questions was, do you prefer low taxes and a weak welfare system, or high taxes and a strong welfare system? Back in 2015, a majority of Greeks wanted a strong welfare system despite the fact that taxes would have to be high. This changed completely within 2 years of this administration. Now Greeks hate taxes. Why? Because this government increased taxes immensely. Right now, someone who works as a plumber, for example, has to pay 60% of his paycheck, if he does everything by the book, back to the government as tax contributions or as pension contributions. Our pension system works in a way that current taxpayers pay for current pensioners. This government has used high taxation as a tool to get some insane surpluses in order to give them to pensioners, to give them to other blocks of voters to buy their votes. Now, again, I'm not censoring myself satisfactorily enough, but to give you a sense, this government has not been a positive force, the positive force that we are looking for to get more investment, get more high-paying jobs into the economy. But I can understand that the fact that one long-standing dispute in foreign relations, the fact that it was successfully solved, has gained a lot of traction abroad and has changed the way people perceive our current government. You have to remember two things, though. This government has not been successful in financial issues, and economic issues are probably the most important that the country is facing. And over 70% of people were against the Precipice Agreement. By the way, in our annual study, we asked the question in two different ways. We had two different sets of the sample. We asked one set of the sample, because there is the ongoing dispute with our northern neighbors, do you think that maybe we had a way to formulate the question with an introduction that stressed the fact that this was a 25-year-old dispute, and we asked them whether they want or not, they're for or against a solution. And the other half of the sample, we asked, do you want a solution in the Macedonian issue? So when we asked it directly, 68% said that they don't want a solution. When we asked it indirectly, when we formed, we discussed, we explained the program, 71% didn't want the solution. So this is something deep-seated. It's a part of Greek identity. Many say that it's irrational. Yes, it is. This government went against a big part of their voters. And by the way, I must remind you that this government has 145 members of parliament. It is debatable whether they have an actual mandate. Yes.
Thank you. Kostis Koregas, on the board of SPGH, and I want to ask you a kind of a more higher level question, which is you've thrown out numbers and we're all excited. Instead of trying to solve the problems here in this room, I'm thinking more on how would the analysis work with organizations like SPGH and others throughout the U.S. and other countries to tap into the diaspora that Vasilis mentioned, and to perhaps either bring ideas. I understand money is always good, but how about ideas, how about structures, how about experiences? Because there's an incredible wealth of experience abroad. Sometimes I've felt it personally when you try to come to Greece to share the experience, it's not a welcome sight. The notion that someone from outside will come and provide solutions. However, the experiences are there for the taking, and it sounds from your strategy that there are many unanswered questions about the how. Some of them will have to be localized, but others will have to be new ideas, innovative ideas, especially with social media and so on. So could you imagine how the analysis can continue this dialogue after you take your airplane back and create some kind of a more lasting bond
Mhm.
of resourcing your challenge at Greece. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, money is not of high importance for us because we don't take contributions and we don't do fundraising. Our budget is covered by our one benefactor, our founder, for the foreseeable future is covering our budget completely, and we are able to focus on actually producing the policy recommendations, which is our main goal. Now, we are Greek-focused, that's important. What we do is aimed at the Greek public to make them understand the issues and provide facts and new ideas and approaches in public discussion, and also policy makers, the people who make the decisions. So up until recently, I wasn't really sure that the diaspora has to play an active role in that. Of course, it's always welcome. Initiatives like this that are invaluable. But I wasn't sure that the solution would come from the diaspora or it would take a lead. Something changed in the past few years. Over 400,000 Greeks have left the country. And this is a power that we would be able to tap into. Maybe you could be able to help us with that. We're going to try and help the Greek government implement these solutions and create more good jobs in Greece. When that happens, we need these people to come back. If you have any more to send us, that they would be welcome as well. That's the infusion that we need. Not money per se, but we need projects that help Greek society retain its cohesion, like what you are doing and a lot of other organizations are doing. And we need minds and hands to come inside the country and work and produce wealth. So that's the only thing I can ask of you as a community. We need your children, we need your educated children to come and work with us, you know, build companies, invest in Greece. I would not be able, because, you know, you're such a lovely crowd, I like you generally. I cannot honestly say that you should go and invest in any type of company in Greece right now. But you know, if you know people who have money, have them start looking. There may be opportunities there. And when we do start solving some of the most serious of these issues, we want you to come. Buy a house. Renovate the house that you already have.
It's going like this, actually.
It's already starting to go like this in some cases because of Airbnb and other issues. Yeah. So maybe the major opportunities have been already lost, but if we don't solve all this, new opportunities for investment at very low prices will come again. So that's the main thing. We need the people who left to come back. And we need an influx of brains and hands, working hands, to come to Greece and build the new country together with us. Yes, thank you. She's the closest, I'm sure. I'm sorry, but I can answer later.
Take two, please.
Okay, I'll take two.
I wanted to hear your view of Germany's role in the Greek economy.
Do you know who our number one trading partner is? Does any of you know? Nico? It's Turkey. So the role of Germany in the Greek economy is the role of a large European country in the Greek economy. That's it. We don't have any factories building German cars. During the crisis, Germany's role was outsized. It was much larger because the Greek crisis was dealt in an extra-institutional manner. It's something inconceivable by European institutions. So the country that had most to lose took the initiative and actually made a lot of decisions in a non-traditional European way, without following consensus. But the impact of these decisions made by Germany during the crisis, some of them were negative. If the Greek government decided to pursue what part of the German government wanted as an outcome of our crisis, I would probably not be here right now, because there would be limits to how much money I can take out of the country. We would be outside the European Union or the Eurozone, or both. But as it turned out, their contribution has also been positive as well. Because at some point, Germany took the initiative and helped European institutions regain the initiative in tackling crises like the Greek crisis. And from that point on, because we have discussed the issue with members of the Troika and members of the people from the European Union who come to Greece, who are still in Greece, monitoring how the structural program is implemented, their role has been very positive. Many reforms, like the reforms I implied are needed right now, have been implemented during the past 10 years in Greece because of the crisis, because we had to make a deal with our lenders in order for them to lend us money and not go bankrupt. They forced us to open up our cruise industry. They forced us to create a new administrative office to collect taxes more effectively. They forced us to give an annual, steady annual stipend to the very poor. We didn't do that with our initiative. They made us do it in return for very cheap loans. So up to a point, the role of Germany was not very positive. They made a lot of mistakes. They took an initiative to take the issue outside the European institutions. You can't say too many good things about that. But from the point where the infrastructure in the European Union was built, that someone else had the initiative, everything went as well as it could be. Bearing in mind that you had a Greek government on the other side. Yes, final question.
So thank you for the presentation. My question is actually going to be very quick. Most of the pending reforms, I know that have been recommended to the Greek government through international organizations like the World Bank, IFC, IMF, OECD, European Commission, but the political parties in Greece failed to deliver. That's a common, that's a fact. So my question is, how much should we blame the political parties and how much should we blame the voters and the average Greek and the mentality of the values that you have described in your slide? I mean, what is the mix of blame, if I may say?
Yes. That's why it's a very important question, because I can't give you percentages. It's again a chicken and egg problem. We have formed this. Now, in the election on Sunday, you will have 40 choices. 40 political parties are participating. That's an enormous wealth. And by the way, during the crisis, we have seen an implosion in our political system. So many parties ceased to exist. Some changed completely what they were before. Some were rapidly diminished. The main political party that governed Greece for the past 40 years is now the third or fourth power in parliament. The Greek voters did that. This wasn't done by anyone else. The way that the Greek political parties operate, they operate in order to gain more votes. That's their mandate. That's what they do. By the way, that's what political parties do everywhere. The difference is that some other democracies, not all of them, have more robust institutions. They have institutions that operate regardless of who's in power. So the ones who are in power have somewhat less power to distribute among them. So voters and political parties can do less damage. In our political system, We don't have the robust institutions, but that is also the fault of voters. There was never a need or an expressed mandate to create institutions like this. There have been many cases in the past where enlightened politicians somehow found their way to ministries and have proposed reforms that were radical, necessary. They're not in politics anymore. The system threw them out. The voters voted them out in the very next election. You had a good politician try to enforce pension reform in 2001. Actually, some of our researchers believe that that is the starting point of the Greek crisis. If that pension reform had passed in 2001, maybe Greece would be a different country now. But when that happened, you had workers' unions, mass protests, 1 million people in the streets. You had the Communist Party unionists send caskets to his office. So these were things that the people's will was expressed, quite audibly, and he didn't get elected by the time the next election came, and of course the reform didn't pass. So what I have to say is 50-50, I guess. And with the 50% of the voters giving power to the 50% of the political parties.
Okay, you got your answer. So let's conclude here. Thank you so very much, Thank for making this trip and giving us so much tonight. Thanks to the audience as well. This thing started in a certain tone, but like many other things through the dialectic, it took a life of its own, and actually many very positive things came up, very interesting things came up. So we hope that 2 years from now, you're going to come back, and some of these numbers probably are going to look a little different, although I wasn't sure that I got that from your presentation.
I sure hope so.
Okay, thank you again very much, and thanks to our audience, and this would conclude our night here together.
Thank you.